Hello, adventurers, and welcome to this third of 7 student archetype calls. First, we talked to the achievers, then the artists, and next week we will be talking to the skeptics. So if you have a friend who fits that description, be sure to have them register at alexellison.com/workshops. You'll also see there the schedule for all the other archetype calls and other workshops on college planning. If you or someone you know wants to take the student archetype quiz that gives you these results that you are an adventurer or a skeptic, head on over to alexellison.com/quiz. You can take the quiz as many times as you want, and you'll get a full custom college plan that's related to your type. So adventurers are a fun bunch, but sometimes they turn their backs on college altogether. I've seen this happen. Even though adventurers are one of the most common archetypes I've seen, they tend to be a little bit skeptical about college. Because of this, it is so important that adventurers are exposed to more interesting college options early on. If they only hear about the colleges that circulate through the media regularly or that their friends are talking about, their attention isn't likely to be grabbed. On the other hand, if they're exposed to colleges like Colorado College, which uses a one course at a time schedule, allowing students to have lots of field experience and they can go on lots of field trips, or Western State Colorado, one of the most adventurous campuses in the country, or Minerva, a sort of traveling school where students travel to a new country every semester, taking courses online with professors all around the world, but they travel together as a cohort. Then I think the adventurers will be just as excited about college as, say, the achievers. Adventurers often get bored, and so the opportunity to dabble in a lot of things in college will also be important. So choose schools where there are plenty of opportunities to dabble and lots of wiggle room, and where there are lots of interesting major options, maybe not just the typical ones that you've heard of, but seek out some of those interesting ones. Also choose colleges where opportunities for study abroad and fieldwork or hands-on learning and internships are ample. So cast a wide net. This is also important for adventurers, to get really excited, present adventurers if you're guiding an adventure with opportunities to do college differently, whether that's through an alternative college like some of the ones I mentioned or going international. So maybe take a look beyond our borders and consider English taught programs in other countries. Note, you don't need to limit yourself to English-speaking countries. Even if you don't speak the language, thousands of programs are taught in English around the world. So the important thing is to make sure you'll feel comfortable on the campus. And so visiting is really important if you're looking internationally, especially. Many international schools don't have the same level of hand-holding as our US campuses, but then again, adventurers might like this autonomy. So check it out. The United Kingdom is attracting the majority of my students who want to go abroad. So to learn more about UK programs, check out ucas.com. You'll find a ton of information there. And you're probably already thinking this, but adventurers are ideal candidates for gap year programs. I recently did a talk with Year On, a gap year program in San Francisco, about how common of an option this is and how easy it is to do and how it can be a really great option for a lot of students. Parents might worry that this time away will mean never going to college, but rest assured knowing that over 90% of gappers do go back to college. In fact, after seeing the real world for a while and gaining some context, they can actually start college with renewed energy and enthusiasm and a little bit more focus around what they want to study. So there are lots of gap year programs out there, some of which award college credit, and those are often the programs that will also award financial aid using the FAFSA, the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. So check out gapyearassociation.org for a list of approved programs and college deferral rules and policies, as well as various funding opportunities. You'll find everything you need there. Finally, it's important to think about what adventurers can do right now while they're still in high school. Consider taking online courses in areas of interest through websites like Coursera, or take a course at local community college. And try out some courses that aren't offered at your high school. And maybe also just a fresh environment would give you exactly what you need, especially if you're an adventurer who is easily bored and gets restless. So try to diversify your learning environment a little bit. There are tons of international service opportunities for adventurers, and I'm sure you've heard of them. But if you don't have the funds for some of those high price tag trips, consider things like Rotary Youth Exchange or Youth for Understanding, which has a lot of scholarships, or a language learning program subsidized by the government, like critical language programs or National Security Language Institute for Youth. So those programs incentivize learning some of the less commonly taught languages and also the languages that are considered of national interest, like Persian and Russian and Korean. Those can be great opportunities to go abroad and not have to pay as much. All right, so let's get on to some of your questions. I'm really excited. There were quite a few today, so I had to run through them and pick some of the relevant ones. And I think some of these you'll probably, maybe you're thinking already. So my son is definitely an adventurer, but because of this personality type, he is a dabbler and hasn't really found his niche. I'm worried that he'll just wander in college, and I wish I could support that, but I can't afford for him to be in college for 6 years. I totally appreciate this, this angst or this sentiment. You know, what I like to kind of assure families of is that if you are seeing a lot of wandering in high school, that doesn't necessarily mean that that level of wandering is going to continue in college, especially once students can actually choose their courses and engage with their professors and be around like-minded peers. Some of the wandering I think you see in high school has to do with just a lack of interest, either in the environment or the people or the courses. So that's probably the first thing I would mention. And then I would also say take advantage of some of the engagement opportunities that I just went through, whether that's a gap year program, a study abroad program, a summer program that just gives some exposure. The key for adventurers, and really for any student, is just context, which comes through exposure. So job shadows, internships, volunteer opportunities, taking on new projects, starting a new club, joining a new club. The more sort of that's presented to a student, especially an adventurer, the more excited and motivated they'll start to feel. And then in turn, they'll feel a little bit more direction, a sense of direction when they do start college. So that's what I would focus on right now. Even more than taking rigorous classes or studying for the ACT or SAT, I would prioritize exposure and really gaining some clear context and a clear idea of what the opportunities are beyond high school. So the next question is, even though I get what you're saying about college for adventurers, I really can't see myself in one place for 4 years. What do you suggest? So yeah, this is coming from a student who really has a hard time picturing herself in one place for 4 years, and I can totally understand that, and that can cause a little bit of fear and anxiety. A couple of options for those students. First of all, I would say consider some of those programs that break up college. For example, starting at a community college and then transferring after 2 years or even 1 year could be a nice option if you're just not feeling good about making a 4-year commitment right out of the gate. Also consider some of the college bridge programs or the pre-college programs. So I'm a big fan of Deep Springs, which now accepts women as well as men, which is very exciting. They're right on the border of California and Nevada in a very, very rural area, basically on a ranch, and you take classes basically in cabins with your professors. You'll sit around and have great discussions by night, and by day you'll work on a ranch. So it's this really interesting, very alternative way of doing college, and it's considered sort of a pre-college situation because you're there for 2 years and then you would go on to a 4-year college after that. And if you're admitted, which is very, very difficult to get admitted, they only accept a handful of students every year, it is tuition free. So that's a neat option. Another sort of college bridge or college prep program that I like is called Wayfinding Academy out in Oregon. And that does something similar, but not so much the ranching side of things, more just lots of exposure, internships, and study abroad. And the thing that they're trying to do is really flip the script when it comes to college, rather than choosing a college and then figuring out what you want to do in the world, figure out your place in the world and then go to college. So those are a couple of neat options to look at, especially if you're feeling nervous about making a commitment. But I would also mention that most colleges now have wonderful study abroad programs. So even if you are at one institution for 4 years, you don't have to physically be there for 4 years. So I would say look at colleges where you're allowed to go on multiple study abroad experiences throughout the 4 years. Some colleges do limit the amount of times you can go abroad. So I would look at schools that don't necessarily have that limit. One that comes to mind that I really like is University of San Francisco. They really set up their curriculum to be very friendly to students who want to go abroad, and the students will go abroad multiple times during their time there. So those are a couple ideas for you. Next question, I really just want to travel on my own after graduation. Can I make my own gap year, or do I have to go through a program? This is a great question. This is something that I was recently talking to a colleague about, and I don't know if I have the best answer, but I'll give you a couple of perspectives on this. So for the student who chooses not to go on a structured program, what will happen is if you decide to apply to college like normal, fall of your senior year, you get in and you request what's called deferment, which basically means you're asking the college to hold on to your spot for a year while you go do a gap program. So typically when you request deferment, the school wants to know, one, that you're not going to go someplace else. So they don't want you taking classes for credit at another university. They don't want you committing to another university. And they're going to ask, what are you doing during this time away? You know, really, are you doing something that's enriching, that is for your own betterment? And so the more of a clear picture you can provide them of what your gap year is going to look like, the better, because they do hold sort of the right to accept or reject your deferment request. And then just a side note about deferment, make sure that the school is also going to hold on to your merit scholarship. Sometimes schools will say, yeah, we'll grant you deferment, but we're not going to hold on to your scholarship. You'll have to reapply for that scholarship when you come back. So that's something just as a side note to check in on. The other, I think, challenge with self-made or self-directed gap programs is that you miss out on the benefits that come from being part of a community, right? So I was talking to one of my past students about this. He did a couple of gap year terms, and he said in high school he always thought he wanted to kind of go it alone and he didn't need anybody and he wanted to do something totally independently. And then when he did his first gap year program, he realized the benefits that come from learning in a community and being among peers, many like-minded peers, but also peers from all different walks of life, and how much that enhances your experience. And so just be careful with the self-directed program. You might miss out on some of the built-in community benefits that come with a more structured gap year program. If I want to go on a gap year, should I still apply to college the fall of my senior year, or should I wait? This is another item that I'll give you kind of the answer that I like to give students, but I'll also tell you how it works if you don't do that. So I always tell students to apply to college the fall of your senior year, just to have as many options on the table as possible. You never know what's going to happen or if you'll change your mind. In my experience, the life of a teenager changes pretty rapidly, so I like to have multiple options available at all times. So I would still go about applying to college just like normal the fall of your senior year. Wait to see where you get accepted, and then simultaneously apply for a few gap year programs that you're interested in, and then request deferment when you do get an offer at a school that you're really excited about. But if you change your mind or you end up not finding the gap year program for you, then I would accept that spot at that college. Now, if you wait, the challenge is that you'll be applying for college while you're on your gap year, which can be a little tricky for a couple of reasons. One, you'll have to go back and request again all your letters of recommendation, which can be a little tricky if you're no longer at the school. You know, I'm sure your teachers will remember you, but they certainly don't get to see you as often anymore once you're gone. So if you are planning on taking a gap year, I would make sure to ask your teachers to hold on to the letters of rec that they wrote for you. Remember, they have to submit them on your behalf. They can't just give them to you and have you submit them. So I would make sure that they save those in a file on their computers, and that way when you do request your letters again, that they have them ready. You know, and of course, the biggest challenge with applying to college while you're on a gap year is that if you are in a remote place for your gap year doing service in a developing country or something like this, you might struggle with internet access or getting all the materials you need together. And even if you do manage to do that, you are kind of taking away from your experience on the gap year. You're distracted, you're kind of multitasking, you're not fully immersed in the gap year experience, which could really take away from the benefits of a gap year. So it's doable. In fact, I've had several students apply to college from their gap year. It just presents some new challenges. So I would, best case scenario, apply to college fall of your senior year. So that's all we have time for today. If you have more questions, please email me at alex@duncp.com. You can also check out the website at alexellison.com. Please also submit your questions for next week's call with the skeptics. You can submit your questions now if you already know what you want to ask. If you are a skeptic, or you know a skeptic, or you're parenting a skeptic, And I'll look forward to seeing you next Friday for the call with those skeptics. Thanks so much for joining me tonight for this call with adventures, and I will see you next time. Bye.